Should men be nice? Should men sit by pictures of pretty flowers? These questions and more will be explored in today's episode of Joffrey the Giant. So, if you're a fan of the channel, don't forget to follow me over on Twitch, on Instagram, on Twitter. Subscribe, press the bell button, consider becoming a member, and join the Discord. So, should men be nice? I run in circles of manly men, okay? If beards were to be the measure, I would be right there in the middle. And this is really refreshing when compared to the state of the Western Church, of the evangelical church in the United States for most Christian men. The church has been effeminized, and not only the Protestant and evangelical church. And so, there's this big pushback for masculinity. Of course, there's a context in the broader world as well, just hating everything that is men and women. But there's this pushback to sort of rediscover, reinvent, reinvigorate, if we can use a word with a root that suggests manliness, invigorate, to reinvigorate Christian masculinity. And so, while the vast majority of Christian men are surrounded, quite frankly, by soft men, there are also, groups of extremely hard men urging other men to be hard as well. And so then the question is, should men be nice? And, I'm not going to be looking for a via media here. I'm going to be giving you a straight-up answer, because you can perhaps see already, right? I'm pointing to two poles, and Joffrey's going to come down somewhere in the middle, and I don't want you to think of it that way. Yeah, what I want to do instead is to talk about what being a man is. Okay. So, should men be nice? No, not if we're talking about, so the root of the word nice is actually, it's connected to the word nescient, a fool, right? And, the word began to evolve, and eventually it came to mean fitting, which is great. It came to mean kind, and that's great. It came to mean precious, delicate, minutious. And those are not really aspects that ought to define a man. So, should a man be kind? Yes. Should a man be appropriate? Right? Which is, that's just the form of wisdom. Why, yes. But a man should not be minutious. A man should not be petty. A man should not be foolish. So what do you mean by nice? And nice is such a vapid word, right? Kind is a strong word. Merciful is a strong word. Well, men should be strong. Now, being strong doesn't mean that, well, if you're strong, you have the capacity for violence. And one of the sacrifices of men, one of the ways that we are called to be Christ-like, is by being willing to do violence and bear the burden of violence. And when I say willing, I don't mean that reluctantly, right? Any of our onerous duties should be taken up joyfully, ideally, right? And that includes the burden, the onus of violence. Now, one of the things that has happened as we look around and we see ourselves surrounded by effeminate men, we have perhaps been raised by effeminate men. So, okay, I'm casting about, and how am I going to be a man in my church, my family? How am I going to lead my life as a man? And, that can be genuinely difficult. And so as people cast about, there's often an overreaction. So the capacity for violence is not the same thing as being constantly violent, right? And so what you sometimes see in response to this catamitic, effeminate Christian culture is a call for being constantly rhetorically violent, right? Constantly testosterone driven, right? And it may seem sometimes like a fine distinction, right? So be kind to children. Okay, yes, every Christian man would say, let's be kind to children. And of course, the Christian men who are effeminate, they can just let their maternal instincts kick in, right? Let me pause as my wife enters. This is my wife, Kimberly. Hey, Kimberly.
Hey.
I'm asking if men should be nice. And you have no preparation, you have no idea what I've said. Men should be nice?
Well, to their wives.
I love to talk about words.
And their children.
And, I've been saying that men should be kind.
Kind, yes.
Right. So I've been talking about effeminate men and masculine men. But one of the things that happens, wifey, she's so patient with me, is that when people react against effeminate Christianity, there's often this impulse to sort of define yourself by rhetorical violence, right? You're constantly fighting and being loud and obnoxious, and you're capable of being kind to children. But I think it should be the other way around. Strong Christian men should be defined by their being kind to women and children, and only secondarily is their capacity to do violence, rhetorical or otherwise, important. What do you think of that?
I agree. I think that's totally true. But I think you have, for you to say nice is an effeminate thing. I think it's dangerous because there's always a time for niceness. So it's just a matter of you shouldn't always be nice.
Right.
That's,
yeah.
You shouldn't be nice to your
enemies. I just don't like the word nice. Yes. I'd rather have words like chivalrous and kind and even polite. I'm a big fan of politeness.
Niceness is for when you meet new people, especially. Or, but you could use the word politeness.
I would use the word politeness.
And kindness is much more valuable than niceness, and you should always be kind.
Yes. Hey, last thing. Mm-hmm. Would you say in front of the audience? Would you say I'm a nice person?
I can't believe you put me on the spot at 7 a.m.
No, I think we all know the answer to that. I'm not a nice person. Thank you for participating, wife.
You're welcome. Okay. I'm out of here.
All right, I'm gonna pause one more time. Okay, so yeah, I sort of made my big point as I was talking to Kimberly, which is that what ought to define us as Christian men, right, are the fruits of the Spirit, of course, right? So patience ought to define us. And perhaps part of our patience is laying siege, right? Tearing down walls and strongholds. Perhaps part of our patience is setting ambushes against our enemies, right? But the reason we can be captains in the Lord's army is that we are patient. And then our capacity, our violence, the violence that we do, and again, I'm almost exclusively talking rhetorically, but not strictly, right? There is room for pugilism and bellic attitudes and bellic deeds. There must be, right? More sports teams should be called the Crusaders. But yeah, I'm getting off to the side. Buy guns, be willing to wage war, but that to the side. Yeah, define yourself by the fruits of the Spirit, and as they are expressed situationally you may need to actually be cruel, harsh, right? But the thing, the kindness and patience and love, these things should define you. So I want to close. There's a text that I've often shared before in this channel. It's the code of chivalry, of knighthood, from the Song of Roland, which is an epic poem from around 1100. And I don't 100% agree with all of these things as being a code for Christian men, right? I accept it as a wonderful expression of a code for Christian knights. But hey, chivalry, babies. It's a great way to think about how to be a man. Don't think of yourself as a soldier. Think of yourself as a knight, right? Think of yourself as a shepherd. So here is the knight's code. To fear God and maintain his church. To serve the liege lord in valor and faith. To protect the weak and defenseless. To give succor, one of my absolute favorite words in the universe, to give succor to widows and orphans. This one is key. This is a big one in what I'm saying right now, which is refrain from the wanton giving of offense. That ought to be thought-provoking. Giving offense, fine, but not wantonly. There's so many, I'm Reformed. So in the Reformed circles, it's this problem is so many Christian men think they're being righteous because they're offending people. And the causing of offense is not what is virtuous, right? It's actually the fruits of the Spirit causing offense that is virtuous, right? You can be merciful and cause mortal offense. That's what you ought to be doing, right? Causing offense by being harsh. What is that? And I understand why people do it. It's because, again, it's in contrast to, here we are surrounded by a culture that lives to take offense, that gains power by victimhood. But again, we're not defining ourselves contra mundum. We are defining ourselves by wanting to be like Jesus. So, to refrain from the wanton giving of offense, to live by honor and for glory. Oh, that one could be unpacked at length, but we're not going to do it. To despise pecuniary reward, to fight for the welfare of all, to obey those placed in authority, to guard the honor of fellow knights. Another interesting thing to consider if you're on Twitter. To eschew unfairness, meanness, and deceit. And I think meanness is actually, and I don't mean by that just cruelty, I mean smallness, right? Meanness is sort of the flip side of niceness, nicety. So being nice is a positive thing, which again, I'm not sure of at all. But if niceness is a positive, the negative side of that is meanness. To keep faith, at all times to speak the truth, to persevere to the end in any enterprise begun, to respect the honor of women, never to refuse a challenge from an equal, never to turn the back upon a foe. And if these are our obligations, and if fighting is one of our obligations, we ought to do that with joy, right? All their wars were merry, right? Let's do it. But again, it's because of what we're going after, right? We're not relishing punching people in the face. We're relishing the fruit, the good fruit, the Christ-like fruit that comes from that, if we are ever called upon to punch someone in the face. All right, so should men be nice? No, not at all. My wife thinks so, but she and I always argue about words. We both agree on the substance of the thing, which is that men should be kind and merciful, y'all. You are so powerful, so mighty, that you can be merciful. You should behave like a good Lord. Peace of Christ be upon you.